Hi everyone, Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, and welcome to this very special Betting 101 tutorial on daily doubles. Before we get to that, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the NYRA Bets YouTube channel for all of our tutorial videos, as well as race previews, card previews, and other specialty videos connecting you to the best information in horse racing and handicapping. Now, let's talk a little bit about daily doubles, and these videos are meant for beginning players, but more intermediate and advanced players might find these videos helpful as well, because we're not just going to talk about what is a daily double, but we're also going to talk about how to play daily doubles and different strategies to use when using this particular bet. So let's dive in and talk a little bit about what a daily double is, how to calculate and build a daily double, and then how to play those and execute with a winning strategy. So a daily double is a very straightforward wager where you are trying to pick the winner of consecutive races. So race number one, race number two, you're trying to pick the winner of back-to-back races. And it's a $1 minimum bet, and you can use multiple horses in each race. You don't just have to pick one horse. I think sometimes that is a misperception that beginners have, that they have to just only use one horse and they have to be exactly right on which horse is going to win every single race in a pick sequence or in a double sequence. No, you can use multiple horses. That's fine. Now, it increases the cost of your ticket the more horses you use, but you don't just have to use one horse to try to pick the winner in those back-to-back races. You can use multiple horses. This is a fun bet. It's a great beginner's bet. It's not asking too much. It's usually a relatively low-cost wager, so it's affordable. It's economic, yet it can have some pretty nice payoffs, and you can see nice payouts on these types of wagers if you're able to wager effectively. So that's what a daily double is, simply trying to pick winners in consecutive races and doing so with any number of combination of horses. Now, the way you calculate the cost of a daily double is you multiply the number of horses you're using in the first race and the number of horses you're using in the second race. And so if you're only using one horse in one of those two sequences and one of those two races, then obviously you're just going, one times one, or, so that would be the most minimum bet, is if you're only using one horse in each race, then it's just a $1 wager. If you're using four horses in one race and one in another, then it's a $4 wager. If you're using five horses in one race and four horses in another race, then it's a $20 wager. And that's what I mean when we talk about being strategic about how do we use these daily double wagers effectively. Because it's one thing when you're using two or three horses in one race, maybe two or three horses in another race. That could be a $4, $6, $9 ticket. That's not that bad. But when you start using 5 and 4, or 5 and 5, or 6 and 4, you're talking about a $20+ ticket. And then you have to think about whether or not the payout is going to match the cost of the ticket. These are things to very much so keep in mind when you're building your daily doubles. Now, why is cost so important? Well, I decided to pull what the daily double payouts were for back-to-back days at New York for the Belmont at Aqueduct racetrack. And I looked at June 29th, 2024 and June 30th, 2024. And you'll see two very different results in terms of just how the races played out in those 2 days. On Saturday, June 29th, there were a lot of favorites that won early in the card in particular. I believe the first 6 races were all won by the post-time favorite. As a result, the double payouts were rather low because picking the winner in back-to-back races, you had back-to-back favorites multiple times in a row. And so the payouts are not going to be particularly high when it's two very logical horses that a lot of people have wagered on end up winning those races. So you'll see the average double payout was only $15. Now, the highest payout was $79. That came later in the card, but the lowest payout was actually only $2.45. So that's an instance where if you had used 3 horses in one race and even one horse in another race, you would have actually lost money on that wager. So being smart about knowing how to construct your ticket is very important in this spot. Now, the very next day, completely different race dynamics. We saw a lot of bigger prices win. The average double payout on Sunday, June 30th, over $54, with the highest double payout being over $123 and the lowest being $660. But that's a day where you could maybe spread a little bit more and be rewarded. So again, this is about combining your opinions, handicapping, and looking at the different sequences and combinations of races and understanding what is going to be the best way to construct a particular ticket for you and to maximize your profit. If you're looking at races and you see a race day that might look a little bit more like June 29th, where there's a lot of really strong favorites, then your double really needs to be very skinny, as we call it. You need to just focus on one or two horses in each race because the payouts might not be that significant. But if you look at a card and your opinion is, man, I think there's a lot of big prices today, I think there's a lot of vulnerable favorites, then you can build your tickets a little bit more differently. You can spread a little bit more, knowing there's a good chance that you're going to catch a really healthy payout. And so even a $6, $8, $10 wager could have a 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 time net positive return on investment. So these are all things to keep in mind, but understand how much variation can take place from day to day when it comes to these types of payouts. Now, what are some do's and what are some don'ts when it comes to playing doubles? Well, the first is using favorites responsibly. Okay. Favorites win about 35% of races. Varies a little bit by track and a little bit by distance and a little bit by class level and things like that. But on average, favorites win about 35% of the time. Well, that means that they're not even likely to necessarily win both legs or even one of the two legs of a particular double sequence that you could get around favorites statistically in both. And this is something to keep in mind. So don't always feel the need to include favorites in these tickets and knowing when and how to use favorites in different ways. If you think a favorite is particularly strong, then just use that one horse in that one race. And that might allow you to use a couple of different horses in the next race and still keep a rather affordable ticket. One of the things I discourage players from doing is spreading while also using the favorite. Now, when I say spreading, what I'm referring to is using multiple other horses in conjunction with the favorite in the race. So if you're putting together a daily double, you're including the favorite, but then you're also including 3, 4, 5 other horses. That's just bad betting, quite frankly, because what ends up happening is if that favorite wins, the double payout is going to be rather low, particularly if the favorite wins in the next race too. But what you've done is you've now increased the cost of your ticket significantly. So if you do go 4x3, let's say, and you go, well, I really don't want to get beat by this favorite. I don't really like this horse very much, but I don't want to get beat by it. And so I'm going to put it in this ticket. And now I'm going to be 5x4 or something like that. Suddenly that's a $20 ticket. The problem is if the favorites win both of those legs, the payout is probably going to be $4, $5, $6. Well, yeah, you cashed your bet, but you've lost money on that wager. So it's not really profitable for you to do that. Like I said, it's not bad to use favorites, but just know when to use favorites and when to avoid spreading while using a favorite. So always want to be conscientious about what is the payout going to be if the favorite wins this race? And does it make sense for me to include the favorite in this ticket if they end up winning? Because like I said, you could still end up losing money. You want to target profitable races as well. You don't have to bet every single sequence. I think that's something that's important to understand. Not every single double is worth betting. There might be back-to-back races where maybe you don't have a particularly strong opinion and you go, gosh, any number of 5 or 6 horses could win this race, and that's just going to become a really expensive ticket. Or you might look at it and go, I think the favorites are going to win these 2 races back-to-back, and I might be able to hit the double, but gosh, it's probably not going to pay very much at all. And so you end up skipping that sequence. That's fine. You want to target profitable races. Where do you have an opinion? Where do you see a weak favorite potentially, or one that you could get around, or potentially where's a race that you think could be very profitable, maybe right next to a race where you see a really logical favorite? Just combining those two things together. So a lot of different strategies that we'll talk a little bit about more in a second. Like I said, you don't have to bet every single double. I discourage people from doing that. It's not something you need to do. You want to target the races where you have your strongest opinions and stick to your opinions. As I said earlier, if you don't like a favorite, don't include that favorite. Just, don't be paralyzed by the fear of, well, what if this favorite beats me? Well, a lot of things could happen in a particular race. But if you have an opinion that you don't like a particular horse, then don't use that horse. All you're doing is adding money to the ticket and negating your return on investment and your profit margin. So just going to be smart about these types of things when you're putting together different wagers. So this is a couple of different examples that I wanted to share. And this is one from that Sunday, June 30th card at Belmont at the Big A. And this is one where there was a double in the middle of the card, 2 races back to back. And this was an interesting sequence that I really wanted to attack. And I wanted to attack it for a couple of reasons. One is in the first race, which you'll see on the left side, I really did not like the favorite in this particular race, in Fuega. This was a horse coming back from a significant layoff, had not run in several months. And I was not particularly confident this horse would run as well as it could later in the year, as opposed to on this particular day. But it was still a relatively short field. It was only 6 horses in the overall field. I didn't really think the number 6, Franny Lou, had much of a chance, but I thought the other 4 horses were all very logical choices. So in a daily double, I included those 4 horses, and then I looked at the next race, and I saw the horse Print Track. This was the horse that was the favorite, and a horse that had won or finished second 10 consecutive races in a row. An incredibly consistent horse running at that level for a trainer in Rudy Rodriguez, who I really trusted in this spot. And so what I did was I simply singled Print Track in the second leg. So I went 4 horses in the first race, 1 horse in the second race. That was a $4 wager. I ended up catching Maggie's Palace winning the first race at 9-1. And then I got Print Track to win in the second race at 6-5. That ended up paying out $31.75 for a $4 wager. So making 8 to 9 times my original investment. This is an example of fading one favorite in one race in that first one while using the favorite in the second race. Notice how I didn't use other horses in addition to Print Track. I felt Print Track was very strong here. I could have used maybe Market Alert or 1 or 2 other horses from that race, but that would have taken a $4 ticket and made it an $8 ticket, a $12 ticket. And yes, I still would have made some profit, but it would have really cut down on the profit margin that I would have ended up turning out in that particular race. So this is another example of finding profitable races and finding them in back-to-back races. And this came from Sunday, June 30th, but not up here in New York, rather at Churchill Downs. And these were back-to-back stakes races later in the card, starting off with the Bashford Manor Stakes and then going to the Han Shin Stakes. This is one where you really felt that you could find a price in back-to-back races. Why? The Bashford Manor is a 2-year-old stakes race. 2-year-old stakes races, especially those with 13 horses, as this one had, are particularly wide open fields. 2-year-olds make huge progressions from race to race. And I felt that you could really get around the favorite in this stakes race for the 2-year-olds. And as a result, you could feel confident maybe going 4, 5, or 6 deep potentially and trying to catch a favorite or try to catch a winner who was not a favorite. So this was one of the strategies you could isolate there. Additionally, so many 2-year-old races are won by horses going straight to the lead. The problem is that when you get all of them in one race together, they all try to go straight to the lead. So trying to find horses that are a little bit more comfortable coming from off the pace and horses that are comfortable with that late kick and have better stamina, that's going to be a really critical element in handicapping 2-year-old races. Now, on the flip side, in the Han Shin, this was one where I absolutely disliked the top 2 choices on the morning line, Zozos and Charging. I did not have particular confidence in those 2 horses. I thought Cagliostro was interesting. I thought Tumbarumble was interesting. I thought Extra Añejo was interesting. However, I thought Tumbarumba was strictly a horse that would finish second or third. That's kind of that horse's MO a little bit, finishing very well, but still not winning all the time. So I ended up just saying, listen, let's focus on Cagliostro and Extrañejo in that second race while fading the two favorites. So this was one where I went 5 deep in the first leg in the Bachelor Banner, and I went 2 deep in the Hanshin with Cagliostro and Extrañejo. Well, fortunately for me, Politically Correct was one of those 5 horses I had in the first leg, and Cagliostro wins in the second leg. Now, this was a rather expensive double, a $10 overall wager, but it paid off over $50. So again, taking a $10 bet and multiplying it 5 times in terms of your profit. Now, maybe you had a little bit of a stronger feel for that Bachelor Manor, and you might have only had to go maybe 3 or 4 deep. Obviously, that would have been preferable because you could have only spent maybe $6 or $8 on that ticket. And again, increased your amount of return on investment. But this was an example of finding back-to-back races where I didn't really like the favorite, and I felt that you could find a very logical alternative to those two. So those are a couple of insights and tidbits on how to play doubles. And what I would encourage you to do is focus on races where you have a confident opinion. And like I said, you can do some combination of thinking maybe using a favorite in one race and spreading and using a couple of different horses in the next race, or maybe back-to-back races where you think there are really strong favorites and just putting together a very low cost ticket, maybe just a $1 or a $2 bet, and seeing if that can have some sort of return. But again, targeting those races, feeling and focusing on your opinion on how you think they're going to play out, that's going to be the key for you to have success in daily doubles. And from there, you can build up your confidence and build up your capacity in wagering by using pick 3s, pick 4s, pick 5s, and pick 6s, which are focused on selecting winning horses in 3, 4, 5, and 6 consecutive races. Obviously, there's a lot more nuance that goes into that because the ticket structure gets a little bit more complex. Cost goes up as well. And we're going to have additional videos for you talking about strategies for those pick 3s, pick 4s, pick 5s, and pick 6s. Well, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the NYRA Bets YouTube channel today to get all of these tutorials as well as horse racing previews and so much more. Until next time, friends, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and profitable day at the races and reminding you that it's now post time.